In this true crime documentary, we uncover the terrifying case of Shauna Tiaffay.
Shauna's not going to be around for when their daughter gets married, falls in love, has a baby, graduates from high school. Shauna's not going to be there for any of that. She will never see her daughter grow up and have all those memories, all because of one person.
When they read that sentence, it was like all the emotions that I had held in for all these years, just kind of bubbled out. And I just was crying uncontrollably at that point.
Our story today takes us into one of the most iconic cities in the United States, a place celebrated for its bright lights and restless nights. It is Las Vegas, a city that has earned its reputation as a haven of indulgence, with its endless casinos, dazzling nightlife, and glowing streets. Yet beyond this glamorous surface, the people who call this place home live a very different reality, and for many of them, working inside those bustling casinos is simply a natural part of life. Among those workers was Shauna Ann Castleton. Shauna grew up in a Mormon family in Salt Lake City, and in 1994, at the age of 28, she made a bold choice to leave her hometown and move nearly 500 miles away to Las Vegas. She spent some time selling beauty products, but it did not take long before the bright lights of the city drew her in, and she decided to start working in the hotels as a cocktail waitress. She began serving cocktails at Fiesta before earning a place at one of the most famous and upscale casinos in the area, the Palms. She adapted quickly. Her co-workers became like a second family, and her customers genuinely adored her. Everyone who knew her said she was the kind of person who laughed easily and lived completely in the moment. Her friend once said that Shauna carried a kind of innocence, that she had a free spirit, and always managed to see the positive side of things no matter what situation she faced. In 2002, Shauna met George Tiaffay at the Palms. George visited the casino often, and he said he noticed Shauna almost immediately because of how hard she worked. She was constantly moving, making sure every guest felt taken care of. George himself had been a standout athlete and the prom king in high school. His family described him as charming, funny, and someone who was always ready to help anyone who needed it. He trained at the United States Military Academy known as West Point and was now working as a firefighter. The attraction between them was instant, and their connection formed faster than anyone around them expected. They soon became inseparable. George told his sisters that Shauna was his entire world, and within a year, their world became even bigger. When they welcomed a baby girl, they named Madison. Friends said George was extremely protective of his new family, and Shauna was completely devoted to her little daughter. 2 years later, George and Shauna married in a beautiful beach ceremony in Hawaii. 2 more years passed, and life seemed steady, until George suffered a major financial setback, losing a significant amount of money in the housing market crash. This left Shauna as the primary provider, and the financial pressure began to strain their relationship. Shauna eventually told people that George had become jealous, resentful, and increasingly controlling. At one point, he told her she looked like a whore when she was leaving for work, a comment that cut her so deeply, especially because he said it in front of their daughter that she decided it was time to separate, even though she believed that once they did, their marriage would never recover. George moved out, and they arranged to share custody of their daughter. Life carried on like this until the early hours of September 29, 2012. At 3 a.m, Shauna finished her shift and quietly clocked out, heading toward her car, which she had not parked in the employee lot. She then drove home, expecting George to stop by later to drop off their daughter, who had been staying with him that night. But the moment George arrived, he noticed the garage door was open, something completely out of character for Shauna. He stepped inside the house and was met with a horrific scene, Shauna lying in a pool of blood. The instant he saw her, he grabbed their daughter, ran back to the garage, and called 911.
911 emergency.
Police, I think I need to report a break-in and a murder. My wife is on the floor, bloody, stiff, not moving. I have my daughter with me. I want to take her to my mom's house.
Well, stay right there a minute, okay?
Okay.
Do you know what the address is? And you don't live there, correct?
my wife and I live in separate places.
When's the last time you saw her?
Uh,
Right, you're good. Take a deep breath.
I'm a fireman. I was at work yesterday, so I saw her about 36 hours ago, I guess.
Okay,
I'm not
3 days
sure.
ago? Okay.
A day and a half ago, I'm thinking, something like that.
Okay. How old's your daughter?
She's 8.
And she's with you, or where's she at?
She's right here with me.
Okay, and what's your name, sir?
My name is Shauna Tiaffay.
Okay, do you see anything suspicious around her? Any weapons, any knives, guns?
No, I had to get my daughter out of there. We came over and the garage door was open and it's never open. And so we went in to grab some stuff for my daughter. My wife sleeps during the day because she works at night.
Right.
And she was on the floor when we walked in the door.
Where are you at right now?
I'm at the garage right now.
Okay, we do have an officer on the way, so just stay right outside and we'll get somebody out there for you, okay?
Oh, God. I didn't touch the body to check for a pulse.
That's okay. We'll have medical on the way as well, okay?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
When the paramedics and officers arrived that day, they were met with a scene so brutal that the paramedics could not immediately determine whether Shauna had been shot or beaten because her skull was almost completely destroyed. This level of violence pushed George to the top of the suspect list since he had a clear conflict with Shauna and a possible motive. Yet when investigators questioned him about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, he had a solid alibi. He had been working a 24-hour shift, and police confirmed it without hesitation. While investigators remained inside the house, trying to make sense of what looked like a deeply personal and revenge-driven killing, they questioned George again, focusing on the intensity of the attack.
How long have you guys been married?
We've been 6.5 years. So we're currently separated.
How long have you been separated?
About 5 months.
This is a tough question for you, George, but it's important.
Yes.
Do you know, was she seeing anybody else throughout the separation?
I don't know, but she was acting like she was seeing somebody else.
When was that about?
That was in June, I think.
Okay.
She said she was just trying to make me mad, and there's nobody else. And to tell you the truth, I believe her. But we took a little break, and we're planning on moving back in together. But she told me that she loves me and that she wants our family to work.
Shortly after this interview, Shauna's sister Paula called George to ask what had happened.
Hello? George? Yes, ma'am. This is Paula. Can you tell me what's going on?
Shauna passed away.
And what did they do to her?
God. I don't know. Just laying on the floor with blood.
Is Shauna's body still there?
In the middle of the call, George handed the phone to a grief counselor who had been assigned to support him at the scene.
I have my suspicions that her husband may be involved in this based on, many conversations I've had with my sister. I highly suspect that he may be involved.
Despite her shock, Paula's call did not offer investigators anything useful at that moment because George still had a strong, verified alibi. As detectives continued processing the crime scene, a neighbor called police to report that he had found Shauna's wallet with her credit card still inside. Investigators then asked George whether he knew if anything was missing, and he told them that Shauna usually kept several personal photos inside her wallet, along with some cash. That single detail changed everything. Because only 3 weeks earlier, Shauna had reported a break-in at her apartment, and among the items taken was her engagement ring. But what disturbed her the most was that the intruder had stolen her underwear and left behind a small pair of men's boxers. This detail deeply alarmed investigators and sent fear through many of the casino workers as well, because it suggested that someone out there had been targeting women working late shifts in that casino, and he might have already been watching Shauna long before the night she died.
A gorgeous cocktail waitress, a mother, brutally murdered in her own home. In fact, when the EMTs got there, they couldn't tell if she had been beaten or shot in the head. At first, everyone thought it was a random crime.
The day after Shauna was killed, news of the young mother, who worked at one of the most famous hotels in Las Vegas, began spreading across local channels. But what no one expected was that these reports would reach a man whose information would change everything. This man was known as Big Will, and he told detectives that he had a homeless friend, known only by the nickname Greyhound. According to Big Will, Greyhound had confessed to him that he killed a woman with a hammer And what terrified him was not just a confession, but the way Greyhound behaved, because he was not scared, and he was not sad instead. He was laughing, almost proud, as if he had completed a mission. Big Will warned him that if he ever saw a murder on the news that matched the details Greyhound described, he would go straight to the police. And when he saw Shauna's case appear exactly as described, he knew the moment had come. Greyhound was homeless and lived in a tent on the far edge of the city, and Big Will said he often visited a store called Albertsons, where he would steal food and sell drugs at the gas station across the street. Investigators teamed up with Big Will and headed to these locations, believing they were the best places to find him, and they did not wait long before spotting him. When officers approached Greyhound, they found drugs in his possession, which allowed them to take him into custody while they checked Big Will's claims. Greyhound's real name was Noel Stevens, and he was already well known to police for theft and drug-related charges. And although he admitted he sold drugs, he strongly denied having anything to do with Shauna's murder. Noel was a low-level criminal, and it made no sense that he would travel a long distance to commit a brutal killing without stealing anything he could sell. And detectives also found no connection between him and Shauna. Police tracked down the area where he was staying, and while he was in custody, they began searching the desert around his tent. The location was isolated, and the officers feared the massive stretch of open land would take weeks to search, but Noel had not thrown anything far. A short walk from his tent, they found a pair of pants stained with blood, a price tag from a hammer, and a bloodied pair of underwear. Back at the station, detectives examined his phone and quickly found one contact that tied everything together: George. When they asked Noel who George was, he answered that George was his friend, the firefighter. At the same time, other investigators were speaking with Shauna's friends and family, asking if they knew anything about this man. And the shock came when they learned that George had hired Noel every now and then to do odd jobs around the house, and that Shauna repeatedly told George she did not like him, and that he made her deeply uncomfortable. But George insisted on hiring him anyway. The police used the receipt for the hammer to track down the exact store that sold that specific model. And once they did, they reviewed the surveillance footage, and what they found stunned them. The store camera clearly showed George Tiaffay and Noel Stevens shopping together, buying the very hammer that would eventually be used to kill Shauna. At that moment, detectives felt certain that George was at the center of everything that happened to her. Back at the station, officers confronted Noel with the evidence, and finally, he confessed to killing Shauna. But as detectives expected, he immediately said he did it because her estranged husband, George, wanted her dead and had paid him $600 to carry out the murder. Noel claimed that he and George had spent a long time planning the attack. George got him a copy of Shauna's house key, paid for dark clothing, and asked him to stage a fake burglary weeks before the murderer's practice. According to Noel, on September 29th, after breaking into the house, he hid in Shauna's closet for a while, then moved to the living room and waited. When he heard her come home, he followed her upstairs and launched his attack there. After telling this disturbing story, he offered to take detectives to the desert where he had buried the hammerhead, and officers finally recovered the murder weapon. 9 days had passed since Shauna was found that September morning, and on October 8th, detectives notified George's mother and sister that he was now under investigation in connection with her death. They were horrified and insisted he had nothing to do with it. Just minutes later, George's sister called him and told him what the police had said. George immediately jumped into his truck and began driving recklessly across Las Vegas. George crashed head-on into a concrete wall at the end of the Summerlin Parkway and the Beltway. He was traveling at more than 80 miles per hour. Authorities noticed there were no skid marks, no signs of braking, and they concluded it was not an accident. It was a deliberate act and an attempt to end his own life.
We received information, I believe it was Monday afternoon, from Nevada Highway Patrol that George Tiaffay had been involved in a collision at the west end of Summerlin Parkway.
George survived only because he was wearing his seatbelt. He received treatment for his injuries at the University Medical Center. 2 days later, officers arrived at his hospital bed and informed him that he was now under arrest. His response was simply okay. Then he asked to call his lawyer and to take a shower and brush his teeth. Authorities believed they had a strong enough case to charge both men, especially after phone records confirmed more than 86 calls between George and Noel. Just 3 months later, Noel Stevens accepted a plea deal in exchange for removing the death penalty from consideration and agreed to testify for the prosecution as their main witness. He was sentenced to 42 years to life in prison. In August 2015, George, who continued to insist he was innocent, walked into the courtroom as his trial began.
You do as she comes through the garage.
I wait until she walks by the door. When she walks by the door, then I come out.
And what are you holding when she comes out?
A hammer.
Okay. Now the hammer that you're using, why that hammer?
Because I didn't want to go and buy another one.
Okay. Let me ask you this: that hammer, where did you get that hammer from?
Lowe's.
Okay. But that day, I mean, where was it between the time you bought it at Lowe's until the time you used it to kill Shauna?
At my first camp.
Okay. And why didn't you use that hammer? You bought it before you bought some of the other hammers. Why not keep that hammer and use it every time you tried?
Because it's wood.
And what was the problem with wood?
It'll break.
Who told you that?
George.
Okay. So now you have the wood hammer in your hand because you were cheap. What happens?
I hit her in the head.
Right. I know that you probably don't want to do this, but you're going to have to describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what happens when you come out that door and you're holding that hammer.
She tells me why I'm doing this.
She says, "Why are you doing this?"
Yes.
Now, are you covered up in such a way that she shouldn't know who you are?
Yeah, I have a mask on.
Do you say anything to her?
No.
What do?
I hit her in the head.
When you hit her in the head, what happens?
She hits the floor.
And after she hits the floor, what do?
I jump on top of her.
And if you jump on top of her, what do?
Keep on hitting her.
With the hammer?
Yes.
What happens to the hammer while this is happening?
It breaks.
So after the hammer breaks, what do?
I throw the piece of wood away and grab the metal piece. Keep on hitting.
After Noel's damning testimony against George, along with the surveillance footage and phone records, investigators dropped the final bombshell when they proved that George had purchased a handgun just days before the murder. Detectives theorized that George had planned to kill Noel after Shauna's death, assuming that Noel was homeless and no one would question him. This theory was supported by George's promises to Noel of thousands of dollars once he collected Shauna's life insurance policy. In response, George's lawyer denied any involvement in the crime. He argued that the number of calls between George and Noel proved nothing, and that the surveillance footage did not mean they were planning a murder. He also pointed out that there was not a single piece of evidence confirming Noel's story. The lawyer added that Noel suffered from mental illness and hallucinations, and therefore his testimony could not be considered reliable.
The clerk will read the verdict. The defendant will rise.
District Court, Clark County, Nevada, the State of Nevada plaintiff versus George M. Tiaffay, defendant. Case number C-286-317, Department number 20. Verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant, George M. Tiaffay, as follows. Count 1, conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty of conspiracy.
George Tiaffay, the former Las Vegas firefighter, was convicted Thursday of paying a homeless man to kill his wife. After 5 days of testimony and about 3 hours of closing arguments, a jury of 7 men and 5 women took 15 hours to find George Tiaffay guilty of first-degree murder and 6 other counts.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, are these your verdicts as read? So say you one, so say you all.
After George was found guilty, there remained only one thing that worried prosecutors and Shauna's family and friends: the possibility of parole. This concern was especially strong because the key witness in the case had a criminal record and suffered from mental illness.
Local firefighter George Tiaffay will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury decided to sentence Tiaffay to life without the possibility of parole. Action News reporter Marissa Keniston was in court today. She joins us live with more right now. Marissa.
Well, the jury had 3 decisions: life without the possibility of parole, 20 years to life, and 20 to 50 years. Take a listen as they read their decision.
Having found the defendant, George M. Tiaffay, guilty of count 7, first-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon, impose a sentence of life without the possibility of parole.
This sentence was in September 2015 and applied only to the murder case. For the remaining 6 charges, he was sentenced to 23 years without the possibility of parole.
But first, breaking news, it looks like the former firefighter convicted of hiring a homeless man to kill his wife will never get out of prison. Hello and welcome to Action News Live at midday. I'm Dana Roselli. Jessica Janner is off today. A judge just sentenced George Tiaffay to another 32 years behind bars without parole. This punishment is for 6 other charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. Back in September, you may remember a jury sentenced him to life in prison without parole and found him guilty for the murder of his wife, Shauna.
In 2017, George filed a 100-page handwritten appeal after his attorney withdrew, most likely because of what George claimed in that appeal, which was that his lawyer had been ineffective. He also argued that he had been influenced by medications he was taking for an injury he suffered while working as a firefighter, and that God had told him he needed to kill Shauna in order to protect his daughter. This appeal was rejected. The court responded that George had planned the murder while continuing to work caring for his daughter and maintaining a friendly relationship with the victim to avoid raising any suspicion about her death. Given the patient's deception and persistence involved in this plan, the court found no reasonable possibility that the appellant would have avoided conviction or received a lighter sentence. As for his stated reasons, the court found them unsupported. In 2023, their daughter graduated from high school, and she had been living with her grandmother since 2012.
We just want to thank the Clark County DA's office, Mark DiGiacomo and Pam Weckerly, and everybody involved, homicide detectives. It was almost 3 years ago that Shauna was brutally murdered, and we're so happy that justice was served. We started this fight for her, and we've got so many supporters here in Las Vegas. So many people love Shauna. And we're just happy that we can finally put this past us and move forward and find whatever our normal is, without Shauna in our lives. But we're just so happy and satisfied that the jurors saw the truth.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.